live.
Good morning and welcome everybody to this meeting of Adults and Community Wellbeing Scrutiny Committee. Before we begin, there is no fire drill planned. In the event of the fire alarm sounding, we need to leave the council chamber through the rear doors, through reception, and assemble in the car park at the front of the building and wait further instruction. On that note, I'd like to welcome Martin Samuels here, and along with Richard Proctor and Linda McDonnell as well. And I think Kevin Rand, you're coming in later or on a topic. So we'll start with apologies, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from Councillors Young and Councillor Cook.
Okay, thank you. Any members of interest? If any interests come up during the course, please let me know. We'll progress to the minutes of the committee meeting on the 24th of July 2024. Can I ask if the minutes, can I have a proposer and a seconder on the minutes, please? Proposed by Rob Kendrick, seconded by Mike Clark. All in favour? Thank you. All in favour? And one abstention, myself, because I wasn't here. Okay, thank you for that. Announcements. There's none from myself, but Martin, have you got some announcements to make?
Thank you, Chair. So members of the committee will be aware that there's been a lot happening nationally in terms of the Care Quality Commission, the CQC, and I thought it might be helpful just to give the committee a brief update on that position. So you'll be aware that the CQC is the national regulator for all health and adult care services. So it's all healthcare services, whatever age, and adult social care services. There have for some time been quite a lot of noise in the system about concern about the work of the CQC and the effectiveness of the CQC. So the previous government had commissioned someone called Penny Dash, Dr. Penny Dash. She is a very well-known and experienced consultant in the healthcare world. By coincidence, actually, she and I worked on a project together 20 years ago. And she is currently the chair of the North West London ICB. So she was called in by the previous government to do a review of the CQC. She interviewed a substantial number of people, and wearing my national hat, I was one of the people that she interviewed in my role with ADAS. At the point of change of government, the new government asked her to give them an update on where she had got to. So she was in the middle of her review. And very unusually, the new ministers decided that what she had found was so significant and so concerning that in fact the new Secretary of State asked her to publish an interim report basically setting out her findings to date. I won't go into the detail of it, but suffice to say that the Chief Executive of the CQC left abruptly about 2 days before the report was published, and the new Secretary of State commented that Dr. Dash's findings were so concerning that he was left with, he couldn't have confidence in the work of the CQC. And essentially what has been found is, I think I can probably sum up in 3 areas. The first is administratively the CQC has got into a position where they have become far too difficult for organisations to work with, in the sense that if you want to register as a new provider, it's incredibly difficult to go through the process to actually register. The new framework for inspection that the CQC has developed is really excellent from a theoretical perspective. It has 34 statements about the experience of care which are intended and designed to be applicable to any and all care contexts. that has generated a system where it is really difficult to work out the connection between what an organisation is doing and what its rating is. And that break in clear correlation between what an organisation does and what its rating is fundamentally undermines confidence in the inspection system, because if you don't know why an organisation is rated as good or outstanding or inadequate, then you haven't got confidence in that. The second aspect that has been a major concern has been that the rate at which the CQC has been inspecting providers has fallen dramatically. They've only done about a third of the number of inspections over the past year that they'd done in previous years. One of the consequences of that is that there are a significant number of providers who have never been inspected because they've never had an inspection since they were first registered. There are also a significant number of providers that haven't been inspected for many years. I think they found a hospital which hadn't been inspected for, I think it was 8 or 9 years. And members of the committee will be aware that in the education world, that had been a deliberate policy that outstanding schools would not be inspected for a very long period of time. When Ofsted then came back to inspect them, they found a very high proportion had not maintained the outstanding level, which caused great distress, I have to say, often to those schools, which had been having a rating of outstanding for sometimes 10 years and more, and then got inspected and came out as requires improvement, because it's really hard to maintain that kind of level. So a real concern that a very large number of providers had not been inspected for many years. And then the third area of concern was the new area about the inspection of local authority commissioning capacity and the parallel work to develop an inspection process for integrated care systems. And essentially the finding was that the evidence base on which the judgments were being made is far too narrow, that the process for determining the final grading is much too mechanical. So there have been instances in the latest round of two authorities where the inspection reports read almost identically, and they've got two different gradings because the mechanical process of counting up the numbers comes up with a slightly different number, which pushes them across grade boundaries. So all of that has meant that there has been little confidence in the ability of the CQC to do the inspections that it should be doing and the accuracy of the gradings that it comes up with. There's been, as a significant change at the CQC. The Chief Executive has left. The Deputy Chief Executive has become the acting Chief Executive. She has issued quite a remarkable apology, public apology for the failings of the CQC. They are actively looking to increase the number of inspections of providers they do. They are actively reviewing the process by which they inspect local authorities. They put on hold the work that was being done to inspect integrated care systems. Dr. Dash is due to publish her final report in the next couple of weeks. So we are awaiting what the recommendations are, but there are calls for really quite significant change at the CQC. I think it's worth noting that CQC has been really quite a troubled organisation since it was first founded in, I think it's 2006. It was formed from the merger of several organisations. Two things I think worth noting. One is that at the point that mergers of several very different organisations are a really difficult thing to do. I think at that time their budget, the combined budget, was also cut by about 40%. They then had a major collapse as an organisation and a major rebuild in, I think, 2012. So I think it's an organisation with a very troubled history. I think the final thing I would say is that the view of the sector, both the care provider organisations, so I'm thinking of the adult social care sector, the view of both the care provider sector and the view of directors through ADAS is that a strong and effective and rigorous inspection organisation, a regulator, is really important. That there is no suggestion that the role of the CQC is not necessary. It is very, very necessary, and we welcome it, but it needs to be able to do it effectively. And so the pressure is very much for the CQC to be rebuilt as an effective organisation, as opposed to, and there are some voices on the health side who argue that a regulator is unnecessary. I haven't heard any such voices on the social care side. We believe a regulator is necessary, but they need to be able to do the job, and currently the CQC is struggling to do that. So more as we hear it, but I thought it'd be helpful for the committee. And apologies, that's a bit of a long introduction, but I hope that was helpful.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very valid and good summary update. And I suppose the only thing that would say is that obviously as the next report comes out, the question will be is how is Lincolnshire faring up in that scheme of things, and is everything actually, are we in quite good shape, or I would say we're not in too bad a shape. At least they come here and generally report to us, which would indicate that they should be fairly well on the ball, but yeah.
I can give a brief response to that in terms of the current position in terms of providers is that we have concerns that there are a lot of providers in Lincolnshire who either have never been inspected because they haven't reached the front of the queue, or we have providers where there had been issues identified. The organisation, often with our support, has addressed those issues, and the CQC has been unable to come back and re-inspect them. So again, that undermines confidence in the system, that you may have a provider that had been rated as good. They were inspected and found to be requires improvement because various things needed to be done. They've taken action, they've addressed those issues, but CQC won't come back for another year or two. So we think, as the commissioning organisation, that they are back at the standard of being good. CQC probably would agree with us, but they haven't got time in their schedule to get to us, and therefore again it undermines the confidence in the ratings, because we're saying, well, actually this provider has a rating of requires improvement, but we think they're good. That organisation has a rating good, but actually we think that they're probably now requires improvement because of the time period since they were inspected. So it just undermines that validity. I think then in terms of the inspection that CQC did of the County Council, we were, as members of the committee will be well aware, we were the very first pilot in the country. I think the comment was made at the time that it was rather apparent that the CQC were learning as they went on. I think that the experience that has been had nationally, I think would underline that we shouldn't treat what CQC said in their report as being necessarily entirely correct. I think I'm not pointing at their report and saying no, it's clearly wrong, but I think that it wouldn't have the robustness that you would hope and expect, and therefore, when in the fullness of time CQC come back to us, and it may be sooner rather than later because of the concerns with the system, their inspection methodology will be very different from what they did, and they could therefore come up with rather different conclusions. So we just have to be quite cautious on that one.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. Very useful update. So, okay, we'll move on to item agenda Safeguarding Adults Board, and for this I welcome Richard and Linda. So welcome both of you.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair. You've obviously got a copy of the report within the bundle of papers, so what I don't intend to do is go through it line by line, but what I will try and do is pick out the salient points and then invite questions after that, if that's okay, the way we do it. So the report here is today just to provide you with an update in respect of the key areas of work being undertaken by the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board, which, just to remind people, is a multi-agency partnership with representation from across the wider partnership, but with the executive leads agencies being the local authority, the police and the ICB as part of that process. So the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board has coordinated work with its partners to progress the priorities of its strategic plan. That's a 3-year plan which we're looking at refreshing at the end of this year in 2025. The overarching priority of that plan is around prevention and early intervention, and that resulted in the Safeguarding Adults Board agreeing its 6 prevention priorities. Now, each priority has a dedicated partnership lead, it has its own delivery plan, and it reports into the prevention subgroup chaired by Linda to my left, the head of Safeguarding Adult Care and Community Wellbeing. One of the areas managed under the prevention strategy, if you remember, and it was previously highlighted to this committee, is the lack of consistency of agencies applying a making safeguarding personal approach. And just to explain what that is, this is where there is a lack of evidence that demonstrates that partners are not consistently speaking to the individual at risk or their advocate who's representing them before they raise a safeguarding concern. Now, we've done a lot of work as a partnership around this through the LSAB, and we presented to this committee as well, and it was agreed to embed a making safeguarding personal approach, and we developed a 10-point plan which has been implemented. However, unfortunately, the anticipated reduction in adult safeguarding concerns that was submitted to the local authority that do not meet the Section 42 Care Act criteria has not been achieved. So, just to explain, in Lincolnshire, the duty to consider adult safeguarding concerns and undertake and oversee Section 42 inquiries is managed by the adult safeguarding team. And that involves a significant resources required, and what that happens is that they triage the high number of referrals received by the safeguarding team and then make a decision whether they progress with an inquiry or take other action or the matter is closed. The data shows that the number of adult safeguarding concerns raised by key stakeholders has continued to increase year on year, with a significant increase in demand in 2023 to 24 of over 30%. So, despite these pressures, the LCC Adult Safeguarding Team have continued to deliver some of the best performance nationally in terms of safeguarding outcome measures, and have continued to consistently meet an ambitious service and directed performance measures that are set locally. Also, I know we spoke about the CQC just there, but the CQC Assurance Pilot report highlighted concerns with partner understanding of the national criteria for Section 42 inquiries. And in response to this, Martin, to my right, the Executive Director, wrote to each of the Chief Executives of the LSAB partnership, reminding them that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. It requested support from partners in making these necessary changes, and we've continued to seek that assurance through the senior responsible officers across the partnership in respect of the Making Safeguarding Personal Action Plan. So while some success has been achieved in supporting partners, we still continue to see a high level of safeguarding adult concerns that are raised that do not meet the Section 42 criteria. So to this end, it has been agreed that there will be review of our front door process management of adult safeguarding concerns within the local authority in order to identify and implement more effective ways of managing some of those concerns and the pressures that can apply. And my understanding is that through the corporate leadership team at LCC, they've agreed to support the project through the corporate transformation team. The work is progressing, I understand, and we're looking also at some early opportunities to make better progress in respect of this. In conclusion, so I hope this report provides assurance that the LSAB is continuing its strategic work with partners, and it contains and remains focused on the safety of adults living in Lincolnshire. Okay, so I'll invite you for any questions that you may have.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I actually thought the report was very good, open, honest, and covered off very well. But so Rob, and then Mike.
Thanks, Chairman, and thanks for the report. I was just wondering that the reference to concerns to be raised by telephone and following the Children's Services model, rather than emails and forms. What was the particular issue by using emails and forms? Was it there's a lack of flexibility, or you couldn't interrogate, as it were, the inquirer?
If it's okay, I will just hand over to Linda because she kind of runs that operational side of the things. Just to explain, the LSAB is a coordinating and assurance partnership. It's not an operational process, so I'll hand that over to Linda.
Thank you. Morning. So one of the challenges that we have in terms of the emails and referral forms that we get is that the information is often incomplete. So we found, for example, that the criteria for a Section 42 inquiry is that the person has care and support needs, is experiencing or at risk of abuse or neglect, and as a result of their care and support needs isn't able to take steps to safeguard themselves. In a high number of the referrals we receive, we can't evidence that the person has care and support needs, or we can't understand what abuse or neglect the person is experiencing. So we feel that having a telephone, an opportunity for people to telephone would give us the opportunity to explore that further with them. A lot of the referrals we get, we redirect elsewhere, so it's not a safeguarding concern, but they might need alternative support. So if we were speaking to people on the telephone, we would be able to give them advice and redirect them.
Okay, I mean, just on that, I understand exactly what you mean by the emails. I mean, we get lots of emails, and the way people put their issues to us can be very confusing, long-winded and all the rest. And the telephone I get, because it's straight to them and actually we can deal with that well. But on the email, do we have like an easy fill template where in effect they can't diverse and they have to fill it in, rather than, is it like that, or is it just drop an email to an email address?
Yeah, we do have a form for professionals to complete. But I think, I'm sure you're all aware that we all find ways to get around bits of forms that we don't quite understand how to fill in, or we don't quite. So, we find that there are blanks in boxes, or where it's a mandatory field, somebody will put a dot in. We've all done it, I'm sure, because we want to make sure that that's sent. As part of our process at the moment, because we want to make sure we don't miss any safeguarding concerns, we would always contact the referrer and talk that through with them. But obviously, that's a lot of work for our teams to do. So we're trying to streamline that process somewhat.
Yeah, because I mean, no doubt about it, there is a high level of inquiries, and that really, and I completely agree that the front door approach has to be the one that starts to help people signpost or shift, and it's blocking the system, which is causing other issues further down the line. So, yeah, no, that's at least worth knowing. So I think in some sense it would be best to pull that till you get something else in place and go with the phone. It makes sense. Mike, and then Tracy.
Thank you, Chairman. My thoughts were on a similar line regarding emails and your lack of information. And I was going to suggest that there would be a standard template that you'd send back in response for whatever category that you thought it necessary, that therefore the individual could follow it. And similarly, further on page 12, it's about retaining staff and training staff, I noticed. I was wondering whether, I don't know how many staff you have that you could possibly retain to do part-time because they find it too stressful doing a full-time employment in this area, because I should imagine it can be quite stressful. Thank you.
Thank you for that, yes. I note your points about staff. I think one of the challenges in safeguarding is that because of the nature of the work, very often when staff are working reduced hours, their cases then need to be managed by somebody else. There are a lot of handoffs, and in safeguarding it's particularly important to build those relationships with people. So whilst it's something that we try to offer to people, to our teams, what they tell us is it's not very effective, it doesn't work very well for them, and it actually increases pressure on them. In terms of the template, we have a very comprehensive template with very clear guidance on how to complete the template. Unfortunately, all professionals are under a lot of pressure, time pressures. They want to get things done quickly. They don't want to miss it, and they want to make sure if they're concerned about something that they do notify who they feel are the appropriate people. So I think that sometimes is the reason why we get forms that don't perhaps have the information that we need in them. But we do have a very comprehensive template, and we've spent a lot of time. The LSAB, for example, when they do their safeguarding training, train people on how to complete that template. But unfortunately, we still find that the quality isn't where it should be in order for us to make a decision. A couple of years ago, we actually took a group of partners from the LSAB, and we did a tabletop exercise based on the referrals that came in, and we took an assortment of everybody's referrals, and we asked partners, these are your referrals. Based on the information in these referrals, would you be able to make a decision on whether this met the criteria for safeguarding? And unanimously of those that we looked at, they couldn't, based on the information provided. So I think that sort of demonstrates the extent of the difficulties that we have.
Thank you for that clear and very appropriate response. Thank you.
Tracy, and then Sarah.
Maybe I'm interpreting this wrong, but it's again about the phone calls and the emails. So I've now got this image in my head that someone who would normally have emailed you is now going to have to make a phone call to send that referral in. But is that phone call going to the customer contact centre or directly to your team is my first key thing. And actually, I wouldn't want you to make a decision based on information on a form. I would want you to speak to the person who's got the concern, because be it whether it's from a telephone conversation or from an email form, your team are the ones that are professionals. You can say until you're blue in the face to me that everyone has a safeguarding responsibility, but a teacher, a youth club leader, whatever, their first and foremost role is not in adult services or whatever. Their first and foremost role is to be the teacher, to be the youth leader, to whatever they be. So for me, being let's say I was a teacher, I'd want to be able to kind of go, I want to share my concern. I want to share it with someone who then can pick it up and speak to the person and make the decision. I now think what will happen is people will phone in, be it whether it's customer contact or direct to your team. I would hope it's direct to your team and not the contact centre, but they will then ask a number of questions, make a decision there and then without speaking to the actual person it's concerning, and bat it back. So then that person that you've just told me is already busy as a teacher or whatever is then batted back to them for them to pick that up and signpost that to that person. So this for me just feels we're passing. We're just passing it around. We're not improving the service, we're passing. That's how it's sitting for me. Maybe I've misinterpreted and I welcome to be challenged on that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, and thank you for your honesty. It is appreciated, and obviously we take all of that into consideration. We're piloting this at the moment, so we will make changes as we go along to make sure it is the most effective for everybody. I think previously when we've been here, you've asked about the type of referrals that we receive that we say are not appropriate referrals. So if I can give you a couple of examples of the type of referrals that we receive that aren't appropriate. We've had referrals that somebody's hallway is too narrow, and so in the event of an evacuation was needed in an emergency, the emergency services wouldn't be able to remove somebody through the hallway. We've had concerns raised that the person is reporting a ghost in their attic. What happens is when we get a number of referrals that are not safeguarding referrals, we don't then have time to deal with those people who are currently at risk. It puts a lot of pressure on the front end, and we don't have the resources. Our concern is that people are getting lost in that. So potentially, if the demand continues to increase without us taking any action, there will be people who are not safeguarded because we are dealing with a great deal of concerns that don't meet the criteria. So in terms of your comment about batting things back, I think what we're talking about is people taking responsibility for things that aren't safeguarding. So if there are a safeguarding concern, then obviously we would look at that and we would pick that up. What we're talking about is people putting things into safeguarding where actually there are other pathways that they should be using, but perhaps they don't know those pathways, or perhaps you know, that it's quicker to put it into safeguarding because they know we will take that action. So those conversations can help to educate people, can help raise awareness. In terms of where it will go, they will be contacted through the customer service centre and they will get a call back. That's what happens at the moment when we receive referrals. The customer service centre redirect a number of concerns that come in that are clearly not. There are requests for somebody to test smoke alarms, or somebody needing an adult care assessment that don't need to come into the safeguarding team. They're not safeguarding. But everybody should have an awareness of what safeguarding is. And so those conversations, hopefully over time, when we have those conversations with people, they will understand what they need to put into us and what they don't. It takes people time to make a safeguarding referral as well. And if they're doing that and actually they should be making an adult care referral, it is duplicating work for them. So hopefully, with that whole package, we will be able to support people. The other offer is that we will have, as part of that, professionals will be able to ring and just have a conversation with us. So they won't have to fill in any forms. They will be able to just ring and say, I'm not sure about this. I'm not sure where this should go. And then we will be able to say, that needs to go here, or that needs to come to us. And so that, again, will avoid them undertaking work that they don't really need to.
Chairman, can I just... I think it's great that they will have that call in to be able to have those conversations. And whilst I appreciate you can tell us a number of examples that are not of great concern in regards to safeguarding, although if someone thinks they've got a ghost in their loft, there clearly are challenges there that need to be looked at, be it whether it's adult safeguarding or whatever. But actually, we can also give examples of safeguarding concerns that will be lost through the net. And I appreciate, of course, that needle in the haystack. The more that are coming in, potentially, yes, a real serious one is going to be missed. I still don't believe that this is the solution to fix it. And it really does gravely concern me, because I feel we aren't spending still the right time and the right methods to get the education there. What we're doing is changing the method, and that isn't going to solve the problem. And you know, I look forward to being proved wrong, but at the minute I'm not comfortable with it at all. Thank you.
Okay, Martin.
Yeah, can I just come in on that? I think it's important to note that this isn't the only thing that we're doing. So we are trying to address the issue at both ends, and I think I think Rick touched on that in his words. So we are on the one hand, we're doing the work that Linda has been describing of trying to change and increase our capacity to deal with the referrals that come in, and effectively to, at the point where someone has put in what we think is probably an inappropriate referral, to have a conversation with them, so hopefully that can be a learning experience, so the individual says, oh, okay, I understand that this wasn't actually a safeguarding issue, that I should have sent it through this route or whatever, and that in future they will pick that up. The other side of it, as Rick was saying, was the work that coordinated through the LSAB about training, doing training work within individual organisations so that their staff get the proper training, so that they know what to do. So clearly, if something is a genuine safeguarding concern, or someone has good reason to think that it might be, and actually that's the sort of operative thing, then absolutely we want them to be contacting Linda's team, because the point that we're looking at the moment is not, is it a safeguarding issue? It's a question of, does it meet the threshold for us to look into whether it's a safeguarding issue? Does it meet that threshold of do we need to do an inquiry? And what we're finding is that a huge proportion actually are so obviously nothing to do with safeguarding at all, that you know, it's more than 5 out of 6 of the referrals that come in, when the team look at them, it's clearly nothing to do with safeguarding. It may be an important issue, but it's not safeguarding. And so what we're trying to do is to work with the other organisations so that they train their staff, so they know, I've got this situation, yeah, that might well be safeguarding, I'll put it through the safeguarding route. Or actually, this is about the quality of care that's being provided by the provider, I will raise it through the contracts route so that it goes to the appropriate place. And I think on the whole, we're having good success with working with partners, and indeed, of course, our own staff, about developing that understanding of what should and go down the safeguarding route and what shouldn't. there are partners, I'm thinking of one in particular, where they've been quite resistant to that, and they've essentially taken the line, well, if we have a concern, we're going to raise it as a safeguarding concern, even if we know that it's nothing to do with safeguarding, because you can't fault us for putting it through the safeguarding route. And that has meant that particular organisation has an incredibly high rate of their safeguarding referrals being sent back because we say it's not safeguarding. And the concern is that actually the point we're trying to raise with the organisation itself is you've got lots of staff filling in safeguarding forms that get sent back. So in fact, your staff are spending a lot of time doing something which is pointless, when actually it would be much easier for them to pick up the phone to the right person, and we're trying to educate them, but you're encouraging them to go down the wrong route. So it's very much a twin-pronged approach. We work with the organisations, our partners, so that the staff know what should go down which route, and we're working with the team, Linda's team, so that if things do come down the wrong route, we'll speak to the individual so that they can, either we can get the appropriate information and say, oh, actually, yeah, that is genuinely a safeguarding issue, and we'll look at it, or no, that's not safeguarding at all. This is the route that you should send it down. So it really is an education route, and it shouldn't be seen as something that stops people making referrals, because if people have concerns, they should raise them. Our concern is that people are raising things either that actually it's a minor thing that they're making too much of it, or alternatively it is an issue but it should go down a different route and they're sending it down the wrong route and thereby delaying things actually.
Okay, do you want to come back?
Yeah, I guess I just wanted to add, has some analysis been done on the things that are coming to you that you think are the wrong route, so whether they should be to adaptations or whatever in houses, and actually looked at how difficult it is to get into those other departments, and whether that's some of the challenge, that the other areas that you'll get, you need a wider hallway or whatever it may be, that actually the other departments are too hard to get into. So maybe your department is accessible right now and people are fed up trying the other departments and saying, well, actually, at least I can get to speak to somebody there, and maybe internally they'll pass it on. So maybe if some linear working across other departments may be beneficial, which hopefully you'll have also done as well. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, I think the customer call centres all have, in effect, itemised what the particular concern is, and it comes under a heading. And in theory, they always want to be evaluated to make sure that our front door is always making sense to anybody that wants a particular service. And I think that's quite an art, easier said than done at times, because when it is complicated, like safeguarding, I can imagine you start filling out a form, and do you want to put personal information on an email where you're not sure where it's going and everything else? And likewise, it's one of those services that does get a lot of non-related twists on the word safeguarding. So, Sarah, and then Nikki.
Yeah, through the Lincolnshire Safeguarding Adults Board, we do a lot of promotions, a lot of awareness raising. Part of the Making Safeguarding Personal plan was my personal investment and board members' investment in actually working with senior responsible officers from each of the organisations, explaining about what safeguarding was, making sure that staff were trained in what adult safeguarding is as well. I think it is a difficult issue. I think there is a lot of complexity around adult safeguarding, and I think some of it that doesn't help is sometimes things like the inspection regimes, for example. So if you look at policing, for example, I'm an ex-police officer, and you look at what policing is measured on from a vulnerability perspective, it doesn't read the same as what the Care Act says. You know, so it is, you know, there is a lot of complexity. So I think priorities, you know, about what organisations see. So what might be a vulnerability would not automatically be an adult safeguarding concern under the Section 42 criteria. But what we need to remember is, and I understand that all agencies are busy, and I know this saying around it, safeguarding is everyone's business, but, you know, agencies do have a prevention duty as well under the Care Act, where for us, we would want people to be proactive and taking action to prevent people coming to harm. But it may not be through the adult safeguarding route. It could be a referral somewhere else. And, you know, all agencies have that responsibility under the, you know, under the Care Act prevention duty.
Okay, Nikki?
Right, yeah. Yeah, after reading the report and hearing everything that you've said, and my colleagues as well, it feels to me like the system is still a bit clunky, but you've identified that and you're working with it. My concern actually is the pressure that's put on your team to sort this out and to get other partners to take on the responsibility of making sure they get the information right. So my concerns are around the pressures on us to sort that out and be the main leader in sorting that out, when actually I feel that maybe partners should be taking a bit more responsibility themselves, and you're still having to do that. So those are my concerns, and I would want to see something come back to say that you'd improved on that, actually, that this is improving well and we're now going down the right path. On the report itself, it did mention actually that around reporting there was emails and there was phone. It seems a bit odd that we're still going through emails and forms, because that's how information can be missed. And you've mentioned complexities. Well, you know, with the increase of referrals, there's going to be a lot of information. So yet again, it's on us to sort through that, then tell somebody that it's actually not adult safeguarding. You know, that's a lot of stuff. So we've got a recruitment and retention issue there as well. You haven't got enough staff to do it. I think that's what I'm reading right. That's difficult. So I'd like to know how we're going to improve that, when you would hope to improve that, how are you going to retain them? And also, on a lighter note, there were a mention of some quick wins there. So could you just identify to me what the quick wins were? Thank you.
I mean, I'll hand over to Linda shortly. All I would say is as this new process is introduced, the LSAB will have a real key part in seeking assurance of our normal accountability framework, which we have anyway, and they'll be reporting back into the LSAB. So that will allow me as the independent chair, if things aren't going as they should be, to challenge, if appropriate, Martin, Linda, in the progress of what we're doing to make sure that we are actually keeping people safe.
Thank you. Firstly, thank you for that, and I have a meeting with my team this afternoon, and I will take that back to them, because I think part of the motivation is knowing that people understand the pressure that they're under, and that helps them, you know, to continue to feel motivated. I think we have a really passionate team of staff, as we do across adult care. So their priority is always the individual, and that's where the challenge comes from, when they feel that they aren't giving the best service to the person. So that's the pressure that they feel as part of that. I think in terms of the quick wins that we've identified, so we're looking at, in terms of attraction and retention, we're looking at how we bring in additional temporary staff to make sure that the pressure on the team is reduced somewhat, so their caseloads are reduced, so that they have got that. We're having regular meetings with the team to make sure that they're feeling okay, regular debriefs after very difficult cases. As you say, safeguarding is complex, and it's one of the areas where they deal with people at the lowest point of their life very often, and sometimes confront, you know, the worst of humanity in those circumstances. So we have to make sure that we wrap support around them, and we make sure that they know that they've got people to talk to. LCC has got a really good staff wellbeing offer, which we direct them to, as well as having regular meetings and contact with the team to make sure that they understand that the support's there and available for them. So we're hoping, we've been really grateful for the support of CLT in allowing the project to move forward with the support of the corporate transformation team, which means that we can move that forward very quickly, and our DLT agreed to that to move forward very quickly. So we're hoping to be able to start the process soon. As well as that, we did make good progress, although it feels as though things have been very slow in terms of making safeguarding personal. At the last LSAB executive, partners agreed, and in fact we agreed interim measures because partners wanted to be ambitious in our making safeguarding personal targets, because they recognise that very often if you speak to the individual at the point of concern and explain the concern, it can be resolved at that point without any further intervention. So all of those activities we're taking forward as soon as we can, and we're taking that back to the team on a regular basis so that they know that the support is there for them at an LCC, from LCC and from the Safeguarding Adults Board.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. I note everything that you've said, and I know you're on it and you're working for it. The other thing that's very worrying as well, with the pressures that are also on the team, and you're trying to do everything you can to help them with their caseload and the complexities around it, and the additional work of having to say, oh, this isn't ours. You know, you can imagine, can't you, the conversations that go on in the office. It's like, oh, not again. You know, this isn't adult safeguarding. There's also then the impact that has on the individuals and the team, and you will be aware of this, that it comes back and then there's a sickness absence goes in because they can't take it, and we've got a recruitment problem. So I think that's a flag. I'm flagging with you now that it's clear the caseloads are going up. It's clear that partners are not able to differentiate between what is adult safety and what isn't, and they're not taking responsibility for it, but we are, and we're trying to help them take responsibility for it. Another pressure. So all of these things now are flagging up in this report for me, and I would like to see an improvement when it comes back here to say that yes, we've managed to, because it feels like you're walking through treacle sometimes, and sometimes it's okay. So, you know, there's going to be pressures on the team now. I can't cope with this anymore. I know, because, you know, I've done it. So I would like to see something come back that's a bit more positive. Well, more positive. I know you're looking after the team. I know you're all aware of it, and I know you're working with it. But, yeah, I want to see something come back. I would like to see something come back, please, if we can be indulged, just to say just how you're getting on with that, because, you know, there's lots of things going on there, isn't there, really? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mark?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I've a feeling my question's probably been answered by the discussion that's been going on, because I sort of was looking at the numbers, the two tables, bottom of page 10 and the top of page 11, where you can see that the conversion rate from concern to inquiry, the percentage conversion rate has been dropping over the last 3 years from 25% down to 13%. At the same time, if you look at figure 2, the number of concerns received has gone up. So one's going one way and one's going the other. And I think that, for me, in numerical terms, identifies all the problems you've been speaking about. In terms of, I'm guessing that's explained by the fact you are getting so many referrals now. They're having to sift through. An awful lot aren't even making the criteria seen on your head. So I think for me, just that table, I think in stark terms does kind of, numerically kind of give the context to the debate and discussion we've just been having. So I think my question might have been answered, but I would welcome any other comments that anybody wants to make. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you. Sarah, your light's still on, by the way. Yes, Richard.
And I know we are speaking about Lincolnshire, but what I would say is this is not something that is just a local issue. It's something that's seen across the country. I'm sure Martin would agree with that as well. It's a similar pattern that's happening elsewhere as well.
Okay, well, do we do a safeguarding, well, I wouldn't say conference, that's perhaps a bit too much over the top in a sense, but like a gathering where everyone comes together, the partners more importantly, to sort of address some of these partner issues, even if it's for just a 2-3 hour session. I think sometimes when we talk about conferences and going for a day, it's too long and partners can't always give up the time, but they can often do a quick 2 hour thing. Are we doing?
Yeah, I mean,
bringing them all together?
My belief in Lincolnshire is the partnership is that it's a very strong partnership. So I regularly meet with chief execs, leaders from all the, and these people will testify that. So that kind of relationship exists, and I know also Martin, for example, works closely with his colleagues in the ICBs, the police. So I think the partnership is strong. I think there is that connection. From our safeguarding perspective, in respect of conferences, we have previously, it tended to be around when we've had a safeguarding adult review, and it tends to be the learning from those events when we bring people together. We also coordinate activity around National Safeguarding Week, which will be approaching this autumn. So again, there's a lot of input, a lot of publication of information around that and case studies, etc. Yeah. What we haven't done recently, I have to say, is have that kind of conference, and we will be setting our strategic plan, as I mentioned, in early 2025. So I think it's a really good point. I think it would be a real opportune time for us as leaders to come together and actually discuss some of these complex issues we're dealing with now and how we can take them forward. So yeah. I think it's a well-made point. Yeah,
it might be something that we look at annually, just on Safeguarding Week, whenever it is. I can't remember when it is, but actually we have a morning sort of just Lincolnshire safeguarding, just to acknowledge it all, and it sort of sends a good message through. But it doesn't need to be elaborate. It can always be held here in this chamber. But I'll leave that one with you. I think
thank you, Councillor.
My view and what just summarise up here, but I think the report in itself is very good, and the reason why I say it is because you have been very open and honest and upfront, and actually you acknowledge that the front door is getting abused in effect, and by not abused, but not getting the most accurate and detailed information that's causing misleading and swallowing a lot of people's time up, and you've acknowledged that, and you've got a plan. Just make sure you've got a slight variation as a backup. I think it will be good to get the report back, which will need to be sort of potentially March at the latest, or else we're in a new term. So there is a date for sort of January and March. The telephone, without doubt, does connect best, and how we address other issues, I think we just need to work with all the partners trying to sort of come out with solutions. As we say, just we don't always get it right, and sometimes we've got to keep fine-tuning, but it certainly seems that the telephone will back up. I think the main thing is and what I would say is to sort of let the staff know that it has come to the committee. We appreciate all their hard work. Staff morale is important, very important, and the fact that they have been doing such a great job with good standards, and the whole thing is in the right path and going in the right direction, is for them to bear with us, and also if they have ideas to speak to Richard, Linda, Martin, or even anyone on this committee, more than welcome to hear it. And I know sometimes people don't want to speak up, but if you don't speak up, your voice is silent. So, you know, it's good for anybody to speak up. And yeah, that's from me. I think all in all, you know, thank you for your honesty. And Martin, just to
Yes, I just thought we couldn't allow this item to end without me noting and bringing to the committee's attention that Linda is leaving us. So Linda has secured a promotion at another authority. So I thought that the committee might want to join me in congratulating her on that next step in her career and expressing my and our thanks to you for all the work that you've done here. And then to note that the process to recruit Linda's successor would be big shoes to fill, but I'm told that we've had a good selection of candidates, so the interviews are being held shortly. Tomorrow, and that we are therefore hopeful of having someone who will be able to pick up the reins. But I thought we couldn't allow the item to end without acknowledging Linda and saying thank you.
yeah, well, we wish you all the very best, Linda, and all the success in your new role. So, and may we recruit well to support you, Richard. So, all right, well, thank you for that. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll now progress on to the performance report. I believe, Martin, you just want to say a few words before we step into the report itself.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll go into the report in just a second, and Kevin will present that report. Just wanted to draw to the committee's attention that I am intending that the next time you get a performance report from us, it will be a bit different on the basis that while I can entirely understand the value of having the performance team presenting performance, I am very conscious that the performance that is being presented is the performance of me and my directorate. And that I have to say that coming from elsewhere, it has struck me as, well, it's different from my experience elsewhere to have a performance team reporting on the performance as opposed to the people whose performance it is. So I'm doing work with the performance team so that next time we should be in a position that I and my ADs will be able to tell you what our performance is based on the data that the performance team has produced. But really, it should be us that you hold to account as opposed to the performance team that you hold to account. They do a grand job, and I'm very pleased with the support that I get from Kevin and his team and colleagues. But as I say, it is the performance for which I am responsible, not the performance for which Kevin is responsible. And therefore the intention is next time that we will present that. And but clearly this time Kevin will present, but I'm here to answer as many questions as I'm able to answer.
Okay, I think that makes a lot of sense. So that's good and welcome. So we'll let Kevin, we have all read the report, so I'll let you just sort of pinpoint, but I think there's two nice bonuses in there. Smoking and alcohol at long last are off the radar. So that's good news in itself. But I'll let you just summarise quickly then.
Thank you, Chair. The report covers performance measures for adult care and community wellbeing services for Q1 at the end of June. The report demonstrates that overall performance continues to be very positive. Across the 18 measures, 16, which is 89%, are either exceeding or achieving their targets. 3 of the exceeding measures were exceeding measures in Q4. These were adults discharged from hospital, the percentage who remain at home 91 days after discharge, and the number of alcohol users that left specialist treatment successfully. The new measure which is exceeding is carers who have received a review of their needs. This has increased from 84% in Q4 to 96.8% in Q1. This equates to only 16 carers not having a timely review. These cases have been individually followed up. There are 13 measures achieving their target. Of these, 11 achieved their target in Q4. One measure was exceeding the target in Q4 and is now only achieving. This is request for support for new clients aged 65 plus, where the outcome was no support or low level support. This has dropped from 95.9% in Q4 to 94.3% in Q1. There is one measure that was not achieving in Q4 and is now achieving. This is carers supported in the last 12 months. This has changed its definition and target for 24-25. Of all the other measures achieving, they were achieving in Q4. There are two measures not achieving their target in Q1. The first of these is emergency and urgent deliveries and collections completed on time. Performance was 96.8% against a target of 98%. Performance was impacted due to a cyber attack in Q1, and this significantly impacted on being able to achieve the target. Given the disruption to the organisation that resulted from the cyber attack, the fact that performance was so close to target represents a significant achievement, with both credit to NRS staff and County Council staff working with them. The second measure not achieving its target is the proportion of adults with a learning disability or mental health need in receipt of a long-term support who have been reviewed. A relatively large number of reviews are completed in the second half of the financial year, and therefore we expect performance to be within tolerance by the end of the year. In addition, this quarter there are two contextual measures that have been included: the proportion of adults with a learning disability who live in their own home or with their family, and it should be noted that performance improved in Q1, and Lincolnshire's performance is similar to national and regional comparisons. And the other one is annual concentration of air pollution and particle matter, and performance was better in Lincolnshire when compared to England in 2022. Full narratives, as you've said, for all measures can be found in the report and on the Council's website, and I'll now hand over for questions.
Excellent. Martin?
So if I can sort of put that a little bit into context. So Kevin has given you the data. Lots of numbers there, lots of met this target X%, and like, if I can just sort of, in a sense, do a little bit of the sort of thing that I'm hoping to do regularly in future. Social care and public health are areas where generally it's quite difficult to get an absolute sense of what is good performance or what is bad performance. So, you know, we might be doing 85% at a particular target. That may be the target that we have set, but how do you know, as members of the council holding us to account, how do we know, as the people who are providing the service, how do we know that that's good, bad or indifferent? So the ability to compare ourselves with other councils is absolutely critical. There are 153 authorities in the country that have responsibility for these services, 10 in the East Midlands. It is a fundamental ability for us to be able to judge how well we are doing, is our ability to compare ourselves with other authorities rather than just, we do need to look at the absolute data, but it's particularly important for us to be confident that we are seeing how others are doing, both to get a sense of whether we're performing well or badly, and then to learn from them. One of the things that we are therefore doing is looking very carefully at our data, almost sort of indicator by indicator, to be sure that we are robustly collecting that data, that the numbers that we present are a genuine reflection of what's happening on the ground, and there are a number of improvements that we have identified need to be made and are being made, and we are really then making sure that we are contributing to the benchmarking activity that is done both at regional level and at national level. And it's worth noting that work has notched up a gear, actually a couple of gears recently, because the Department of Health and Social Care now, rather than simply taking our performance data that we have calculated, the process now nationally is that they extract the data of individual people, client level data, and they are able to analyse that themselves. So rather than us collecting data and reporting it to DHSC now get the base data and can do the analysis, and it's therefore even more important that we are absolutely robust in that and that we can do the comparisons. I think what we're finding through that benchmarking activity is that Lincolnshire does provide a good level of service, that when you compare us with other similar authorities, and I tend to be much more interested in how our performance stacks up against statistical neighbours as opposed to necessarily geographical neighbours. You'll recall, I came here from Leicester. A number of aspects of service in a big city like Leicester will inevitably be different from a rural place like Lincolnshire, so I'm more interested in looking at other rural places and see how they deal with things. What comes out from the benchmarking data is that Lincolnshire generally does provide a good quality of care, that we are quick in what we do, and that people don't wait long for services, and that I think I can provide quite a significant level of reassurance there. We do appear to support a rather smaller proportion of the population in the care system than you might expect, and that's causing us, I'm asking the teams to understand that a bit better and see what's going on there. We do seem to support a rather larger proportion of the people that are supported in residential care rather than in community settings. And again, that may be a product of, if you support fewer people, you're almost certainly going to be supporting the higher level people, the people with higher levels of need, and probably therefore you'll have a higher proportion of them in residential care. But we need to understand, and that's the sort of thing that's coming out from the benchmarking data. I'm also very conscious that performance data looks backward. This is how we have been performing. I'm conscious in that regard that the financial position of the council is becoming more challenging. This will become evident as we go through the medium-term financial plan process, but it is clear that the financial position is not looking as if it's going to improve, let's put it that way. We're also aware, and as members you'll be well aware, that there are changes in the scale and nature of need across the county. There are more people, there are older people, the diversity of the county is changing, what people want is changing. And we therefore need to be thinking much more, not just about delivering good services today, but making sure that we will be able to deliver good services in 2 years, 5 years, 10 years time. So I am working on developing and enhancing our capacity to make that forward plan, which we've perhaps been less good at in the past. And then the last thing, just quickly to pick up the comment that Kevin made about NRS. So NRS is our community equipment supplier. There are 3 large community equipment suppliers nationally. They each have about a third of the country in terms of their contracts. So we happen to be with NRS. They, as Kevin said, they suffered a very severe cyber attack nationally at the start of the financial year. Interestingly, one of the other community equipment companies, one of the other 2, also had a very major attack at the same time, but their computer systems are a bit more robust and they were able to deal with that. NRS have been very impressive in the way that they have responded to that cyber attack, which did completely knock offline their main computer systems. In fact, the way in which they have recovered and the minimal impact on Lincolnshire residents from that, I think it stands the company in very good stead. They may need a new IT director, I don't know, but their response in terms of actually dealing with that and providing equipment for Lincolnshire people was, you would hardly have noticed that the company had this very major attack, as I say, which had knocked out their main IT system. Worth also noting, and I know this is more an issue for the health scrutiny than for this committee, but NRS is also our wheelchair provider, has been since the 1st of April. There has been a lot of noise in the system about wheelchairs. The reason I'm raising it here is that from the 1st of April, not only did we have a new supplier, but the County Council became the organisation that held the contract. So it's an NHS service, well, it's a service commissioned by the NHS and entirely the responsibility of the NHS, but they have asked us to commission the service for them because they think we do a better job, and we have secured NRS to do that. There has been, as following the changeover, there's been a lot of noise in the system about issues with the wheelchair service. I think what I would say is that NRS, in everything that I've seen, have performed remarkably well, and that they effectively were the previous provider, it would appear, decided that given that they were losing the contract, they weren't going to put as much effort into it as they should have done, and therefore the position that NRS inherited was not a good position at all, and NRS have really risen to the challenge. And although in a way there's a lot of noise in the system because it's now being resolved, and so you hear about it because people have realised that if they say something, something will actually happen, whereas under the previous provider it wasn't. So I think I would, although NRS has definitely had their troubles, the way they've responded on both fronts has been really quite impressive.
Excellent. Well, I think there's lessons to be learnt from cyber attacks, and it sounds like NRS has stepped up and done the job well. I think generally, there's always something that seems to trip us up in all these reports where we sort of don't quite meet the bar, but all in all, I think there's some good stuff in there. I think an area which sort of is of concern is the number of assessments in everything that we do is greater and greater, and we're talking about assessments here and the request for support for new clients where the outcome was no support, and we're talking sort of 7,421 with 6,997 no further support. And in some sense, when we've talked about the agenda item before, it's all that sort of the assessment work at the front door, which they're having to undertake with safeguarding, and similar thing here. And I think it does highlight the need for sort of keep working on the dialogue so that people understand, I think, more what we do, who does what, and how it all sort of comes together. And when you've got sort of nearly 7,000 with no further actions, that's a lot of work, whichever way you look at it, just to have taken them through to get to no actions or signposted in an appropriate way. So in fact, I did sort of just mention earlier about the future will be sort of a lot more focused, I suspect, around artificial intelligence, AI, and a lot of the work I've seen on that is actually it does really take away a lot of the mundane stuff and actually supports frontline workers much better, where they can actually be far more focused on the job that they wanted to do in the first place and not have to run all the sort of the stuff like the sort of things that don't work or complicated and time consuming. So Martin.
Yeah, if I can come back on that, and I think the issue you raise is a really important one, and I think it actually very, very neatly highlights that position of social care being one of those areas where absolute numbers are quite difficult to go by. So that issue of the proportion of people who approach the council who then don't get a service, and that can be both. That being a high number can be both a good thing and a bad thing. So it can be a good thing on the basis that one of our major concerns is that people struggle, that they're getting less well, they're getting older, they're finding it harder to deal with everyday life. We really don't want people to just be suffering in silence and finding life difficult and not doing something about it. Partly because that's just bad for them. The whole, my directorate exists with the purpose of Lincolnshire people being able to have a good life, and if people are struggling at home and finding it more and more difficult to cope and not approaching anyone for help, then that's clearly a poor outcome. Partly also I'm concerned about that because if people struggle, then the odds are that the decline in the rate of decline in their health is likely to be faster than it needs to be, and that therefore the odds are that if they struggle on in silence and don't really know what to do, then probably they will become less able to deal with everyday life more quickly, and then they'll come into the care system and we will need to provide them with a service. So I have a very strong incentive to engage with people at an early point. Very often there are opportunities in the community, there are voluntary sector organisations, there are things that, social capital that people can tap into that could provide support for them that aren't formal services that therefore they don't have to pay for, because of course adult social care is a means-tested service, that people can access that would enable them to have a better quality of life without accessing services. Chair, you mentioned AI. The potential from technology is growing almost literally every day. I mean, I've had conversations with tech providers who've said that they quite deliberately don't want to be connected simply to one provider, one tech manufacturer, because they get a bit of tech and probably in 6 weeks' time, some other manufacturer has come up with something better, and it is moving at that pace. So there is an enormous range of opportunities that people can tap into in their communities or that they can get hold of through technology, that it's quite difficult for people to know what's out there. And so we are doing work in terms of the Connect to Support website and trying to make it easy for people to self-serve. But there are still quite a lot of people who find it quite difficult to do that kind of thing. And I would far rather that they rang the customer support centre and they spoke to someone who had the conversation, and it therefore appeared on the statistics, and we were able to signpost them to something that they could do for themselves that didn't need to bring them into the care system. So to some extent, more of those phone calls is a good thing. On the other hand, more of those phone calls might imply that we're not as effective as we need to be in terms of the online information offer. So it's one of those things where the number itself doesn't necessarily tell us something, but it causes us to ask some questions. So I think it's a possibly a slightly long-winded response to the point you raised, that we shouldn't necessarily see that as being a bad thing, that lots of people are ringing us and not going into the services. But we do need to look and see, well, instead of ringing, would they have been able to have had maybe an AI solution on a website that might have taken them through? And there are things that we're doing on that front.
Excellent, thank you. Nikki?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Martin. I'm glad you brought up that, because I'd actually made a note about AI, and there's obviously going to be a change, isn't there, about how we're going to provide service, who's going to access it. My concerns about that are similar to yours, that there are a number of people, and I think everybody on this panel has actually thought about those people who don't contact our services, who perhaps need help but aren't getting a service. So AI would be an obvious solution, but also there's a cost implication with that as well, because there will be some companies, it won't be free at point of contact like NHS, so anything like that needs to be free at point of contact just as it would be NHS, but it's a different kind of service, levelling at those people, looking at preventative, so if they don't feel quite right, instead of getting to the age of 60 and 70 and they're not right, we obviously need to look at that earlier, and I know that we as a council are doing that and looking at preventative. We take that very seriously. The other thing as well that I want to ask about, since you brought this into conversation, is the pressure that will be brought upon service if GPs continue or look at capping the number of appointments they have to 25. Now, I don't think that that's happened very much across Lincolnshire, but it's a possibility, and we still have a service that is really rather dated, works 9 to 5. I'm sure they're very busy, and yes, they take specialisms on, so they might be interested in something else, and they might be having other staff members making phone calls until 8:30 at night to support the service. But the service is not available over the weekend. You know, we all have to adjust, and we have adjusted. We have to work. I mean, I know I work over the weekend. I try and shut down or something for a few hours, but you can't not look. And so I feel that that's not in step with us, and I think that there's a conversation that really needs to be had there at a national level, and probably you'll have that conversation when you go to the city and maybe bring that up. I don't know, there's lots of improvements, but certainly AI is a thing that can alleviate, provided it's free and provided people know how to use it and it's accessible, and we've got the premises to make it accessible, but then there's a cost implication around that. So I think there's a lot of discussion to be had around that, because services obviously got to change, and people are getting older, and the demographics of our county, like East Lindsey, you've got an older generation living there, and they're going to need a lot of support and possibly not got the service in place. So there's a huge discussion, I think, that needs to be held, and we maybe need to address it maybe through this, or maybe public protection, I don't know, or the health scrutiny, I don't know. But certainly I would like to have some input into that, and maybe it be looked at as a future issue to discuss. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Can I come back on that? So you raised, two really important points, and I'll try to be brief. So in terms of technology, we recently had an organisation come in to give us some advice about our digital strategy, and they strongly recommended that technology in people's homes should be a major focus for us. The point you make about take-up and people's ability to pay for kit is one of those really critical issues, and one of the things that we're looking into is where does that balance lie, where it makes sense for the council to provide the tech, to pay for the tech in people's homes, because although that involves a cost to the council, the saving that is achieved through someone maintaining a better quality of life for longer and therefore not coming into the care system can with many groups of people can way outweigh the cost of the technology. Where's that line for where it makes sense for the council to pay for it, and where is it that we can appropriately recommend people and signpost people to technology that they can buy for themselves, or family members can buy for aged parents or disabled siblings or whoever. So that's one of the key things we're looking at, but very much understanding, and I think very much taking your point, that there are definitely areas where it completely makes sense for the council to fund the technology in order to avoid issues in the future. Then quickly picking up on your point about GPs, it is, well, so I am reminded, I joined the NHS 22 years ago, and I was at that time the head of planning for one of the original strategic health authorities down in the east of England. And I remember at the time we had a target for there to be annually a shift of 1% of the NHS budget from hospitals into the community. That was 22 years ago. If you look at the data, at least over the last 10 or 15 years, it is the hospital budget that is increased and the community budget has been falling. So not only has it been falling as a proportion of the total NHS spend, I think it's actually true to say that it's been falling, you know, in real terms. And it's interesting that we're in a position where the NHS regularly go to the minister and say, well, the reason we have problems in hospitals is because social care aren't getting people out quick enough. We as adult social care are now in a position of regularly going to the minister and saying, if you want hospitals to be able to work effectively, you need to invest in community healthcare. And that is more GPs, more district nurses, more support staff. I think the ratio of GPs to members of the population has fallen quite significantly over recent years. I think the number of district nurses in the country, I believe I'm right in saying, is almost halved in recent years. It's simply not possible for community healthcare services in the Broad to provide the kind of service that is required, particularly in the context of the ageing population that we're seeing, and actually also the significant growth in working age disabled people. So I would, you were asking which scrutiny committee it might be most effective to go to, and I think community healthcare would be a responsibility of the health scrutiny, but I think it would be absolutely appropriate for members, if you wanted to seek for that scrutiny committee to challenge the local NHS about what are they doing about community healthcare, because if we're spending all of the money on hospitals, well, then actually that can never work, because if you're not dealing with people in the community, then there will always be a greater flow into hospital than can possibly be dealt with. And if we just keep on making more and more hospitals and bigger hospitals, then they will simply, you're simply putting off the day when they get overwhelmed. So community healthcare is a fundamental part of the process. As adult social care, we are making that point to the NHS and to Department of Health and Social Care. I'm sure it wouldn't be unhelpful for the scrutiny committee here to consider that and perhaps reinforce that point.
Thank you. And on a point for Lincolnshire, our community healthcare has evolved into the new one group model with the hospitals, so worth just noting. But I think, and I think the whole community healthcare is an interesting topic in its own right. I think, my view, it should be more consolidated and hub-driven rather than scatter-bombed and have little services all over the place. But there we are, that's just an opinion. Back to performance. Any other questions? We're all happy? I think Mike?
Thank you, Chairman. It's page 18, adults receiving direct payment. I was just wondering, on benchmarking points of view, do we ever go back to those who receive direct payment to see if they're getting the right quality of service for what they've been given money for? And similarly, have we ever done any number crunching in the regards of, do we have an estimated figure, for instance, on by giving money to individuals, are we saving money through the system as opposed to paying other organisations that provide the facilities of looking after people in the community? Thank you.
Thank you.
Very good question. Direct payments is a really tricky issue for adult social care. So there is a lot of evidence, and it's been in place for many years now, that if you give people control over what the money is spent on and give them the flexibility over where they spend the money and that sense of control, it is very good for their well-being, and that lots of evidence that generally leads to people being able to maintain a good quality of life at lower costs. So lots of evidence nationally, and this has been going for decades. And one aspect of that is that oddly enough, people don't feel the same every day, and generally our systems will book you in, right? We'll have 3 visits a day every day, and they'll be at these times, and that's what the package is. And if you're feeling a bit better on one day, and perhaps actually you don't need someone to come in and make your lunch, well, you're still going to get someone to come in and do it. And if you're feeling really grotty on another day, and you could really do with someone being with you a bit longer, sorry, the package has been booked for this amount of time. Whereas if you have a direct payment, it's much easier for you to reach an agreement with the provider and say, look, actually don't worry about coming in tomorrow for the lunchtime appointment. I'm fine. And could you stay for an extra half hour, or could you do an extra visit, in 2 days' time? And that's the kind of flexibility that people who pay for their own care have, and effectively we're trying to give that through direct payments. So there's a lot of national evidence that says that people do have a much better experience through a direct payment. Do we collect that kind of data locally? Not really. So I think we do have some concerns about whether people do actually have a good experience, and I think that Lincolnshire has a very high proportion of people receiving direct payments, compared to our statistical neighbours. So an absolute number of 40-odd%, you wouldn't be able to see whether that was good, bad, or indifferent. Is actually much higher than is the norm for our statistical neighbours. Am I comfortable that everyone there is right, that they should be getting a direct payment, that it is the best option for them? Hand on heart, no, I'm not sure, and it's one of the things I'm wanting the team to look at. Is it saving us money? Well, to some extent, because we tend to pay people, we give people a lower rate of funding if they have a direct payment than if they go through a contract, largely because the assumption is that if you have a direct payment, you'll be going to very often a personal assistant, and therefore they haven't got all of the on-costs that a company would have. So just very briefly, people sometimes note that the rate that we pay per hour of care for home care is probably about double the minimum wage. And people say, well, hang on, where does all that money go? Well, it goes on the fact that the employer is paying national insurance and pension contributions, and someone has to be the manager for that, and they have to pay for the training, and there are lots of on costs that come from running a company and employing people. If you are a member, an individual, and you're employing a personal assistant, lots of those on costs disappear because you're directly employing someone, and therefore you should be able to get that care at a lower rate, and therefore we pay you a lower rate, and therefore the council makes a saving. Again, whether that always works is another question. So direct payments, on the one hand, a big success story for Lincolnshire, very high proportion compared to others, and as I say, nationally, having a direct payment is associated with better outcomes and lower cost. Am I confident in Lincolnshire that we're achieving that? I want to get some more information. So I'm aware I'm giving a sort of yes and no answer.
I mean, I think actually it does warrant a bit further work and exploration to see actually if we are, as you say, the fact we've got that 42% that actually they do think it's a good service is quite important, and it's meeting their needs. Just on that, I think there's always a limit to this area, that you're not going to get 100% because there's a lot of people that aren't in the state to be able to apply or handle their own direct payments. So there is a limit. The spike was actually relation to COVID and the outcomes and coming off the back of that, where people actually decided to take a bit more control of their own agenda. Off the back of COVID, I believe, when you roll it back a few years, which would suggest, when I sat and saw this, I was thinking, what else could we do to potentially spike it again? What was the impact from the spike that caused it for people to jump and actually become? But I think, as Mike said and as Martin has replied to, there is a bit further work to be done in this to perhaps get a slightly better understanding of how well the service is for the people, and what else can we do to sort of keep driving that personalisation agenda. Rob, you're next.
Thanks, Chairman. I just want to pick up on the point of AI. I seem to remember it was some months ago, possibly even last year, we had a demonstration of various aids and equipment in one of the committee rooms, and I can't recall whether it was actually after one of these meetings, but maybe it would be helpful for members if we could have something similar after a future meeting, because I was very impressed with the range of the technology and some of the things it could do actually to support people. So I think that might be very, very helpful for members to get an idea of what's being currently looked at, if that's possible. Thanks, Chairman.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it'll resolve a lot of the social isolation problems, which is actually causing us more of the issues in terms of assessments, numbers, and everything else, and GP visits, and you name it. So, if you can have a little chat with your AI, and or the fact that we've actually got a much more of a what I call community dialogue online as well, it'll all help in resolving. Perhaps one of the biggest issues of social isolation. So, okay, well, all in all, good report, and I think just a bit of focus on the areas that do underperform, and keep driving the good work on the areas that are performing. But I think, you know, when you look at sort of like the smoking and the alcohol, it seems though that like one new Lincolnshire and, you know, and the fact of the NHS, people are sort of coming a bit closer together, working together, and I think they're getting a better understanding of how people are and work, which is why they're perhaps actually getting better results. So, okay, all okay with that? Okay, well, thank you for that. So, on that, then we'll go to the forward plan.
Thank you, Chairman. No major changes to the plan, other than to the 19th of March, where the committee has asked for an update from the Safeguarding Adults Board following the discussion for that item. I don't know, Chairman, if I can mention the discussion we were having before the meeting about a summary, for me to prepare a summary of the committee's activities over the council term, also to that meeting on the 19th of March. But those are the two changes that we'll be putting forward at this stage. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. My view is on the 19th of March, technically it's the end of the term and it's the last sort of committee meeting, and in some sense I just sort of asked the question whether there is something that we should do to sort of summarise up what we've done, or anything forward that we want to put forward to the next term. I mean, it's the last sort of chance to sort of have a say or sort of propose anything, or, you know, see where we go. But anyway, Simon's going to sort of have a look at that sort of whole thing. And the only other one was on the works programme for next month. We've got the CQC bit, and there is an element on the workforce agenda and recruitment. And I have just asked that we ask Melanie Weatherall from Lincolnshire to also perhaps come along and join us on that workforce, because I know it also rolls out through Lincolnshire to all our care homes and day care service providers. So I think a joined up approach is a good thing for that. So see what they say. Anyway, we'll see if we'll invite her, see if she can make it. So, okay. On that note, then, thank you all for coming, and safe trip back. Thank you.